We work with Miranda Wilson, who is a professor of cello in the School of Music. So we met with her and she talked about her scholarship and the fact that, she's teaching cello and there was these very old books that she wanted to translate. One of them was in Old German and it had specific word terms in it related to the practice of cello and specific references to human anatomy. It's a challenging translation task. Then she wanted to do this so that she could use that material to teach students and then share it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Vandal Theory, a podcast about science and research at University of Idaho. My name is Lee Cooper, and I'm going to be your host for today. I'm the science writer and editor here at University of Idaho, and I'm joined today by Danae. Hi, Danae.
Hi, Lee. I'm Danae Lenz, and I'm the External Communications Coordinator for U of I.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about artificial intelligence. And to start us off, Danae, have you ever used AI programs like ChatGPT or anything like that?
I have. I've used it for a few different things, but mostly what I use it for is to make my job a little bit easier. So I use it for writing synopses and coming up with headlines and all that kind of thing after we put the bulk of the work into it. But at the end, it just makes it a little bit easier to plug it into AI and be like, hey, come up with an SEO-friendly headline for this article. And that's mostly what I use it for.
Yeah, same here. That's why I started using it. As a science writer, it does miss some of the nuances of some of the complex science, so having to double check it once I have it, look for a headline or a synopsis or something. But it does really nice job, like you said, looking for making things Google friendly or making fun social posts, things like that. So today we're going to meet Barrie Robison, a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences and the director of the Institute for Interdisciplinary Data Sciences at University of Idaho. Now, artificial intelligence seems to be infiltrating all aspects of our lives, and Robson will discuss the ways U of I is supporting its researchers in terms of using AI, including a story of translating old educational texts. And he's going to talk about how he hopes his team can improve how the university is run using AI. All right, Danae, ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to get into it.
Well, Barrie, welcome to the podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's cold outside.
It is quite cold outside, but thank you for making your way over. Before we dive in, can you introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. I'm Barrie Robison. I'm a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences and the director of our Institute for Interdisciplinary Data Sciences here at the U of I.
What does the IIDS do?
Well, we provision all of the university's research computing infrastructure. We have a genomics and bioinformatics core. We administer interdisciplinary grants. Mostly we have a reasonably big team of different flavors of nerds that are really, really skilled at things like data science, software engineering, bioinformatics, genomics. And the goal is to help researchers at the U of I get their research done when those kinds of tools and approaches are needed.
It makes sense. These days, that's so necessary because, you can be an expert in biology or geology or whatever the case may be, but a lot of the data analyses and the techniques and stuff are so complicated that you need not only the expert in geology, but also the expert on how to deal with all the data.
Yeah, data sets are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that's a thing that we help people with. And there's a lot of pretty sophisticated computational things you can do now that have a lot of advantages. And we have people on staff who can help researchers with that so that they don't have to have their own software developer funded off of grants full time.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about one of those tools that's just ramping up across the board.
Mm-hmm.
We're focusing on AI today, or artificial intelligence. And before we start getting into all the various projects you're working on, what is AI, at least in the way we're going to talk about it today?
Right. Generally, these days, when people are referring to AI, they're referring to this surge in capabilities of what we call generative artificial intelligence. And so in a couple of years ago when ChatGPT came out, that's really what people tend to be talking about when they're talking about AI. More broadly, though, artificial intelligence, I mean, that's been around for a long time in the computer science field. And there's lots of more conventional things that they do, like machine learning and natural language processing and stuff like that. It's in that kind of category. But these days, in the sort of general public's awareness, when we say AI, they're usually talking about generative artificial intelligence.
And in this case, I mean, if we're going to give some examples, the artificial intelligence program takes something, whether that's a written piece or a song or an art, and you give it instructions and it changes it into some other form of media. So maybe you're taking music and making an art piece out of it, or you're taking a written document and changing how it's formatted or putting it in a different tone or something like that.
Yeah, you can kind of think of these things as you have some kind of input, you have a mysterious model running on a server somewhere, and then that model will take your input and give you an output. The most common application right now is what we call a large language model, so that you type text into it and you get text out. And that could be a summarization, it could be a title for your article that you wrote, could be an expansive 3-page essay on how something works or something like that based on a prompt that was only a couple of words long. It's generating new text based on what you typed in. But as you say, there's lots of what we call multimodal models. So it doesn't have to be text to text. It
Okay.
can be audio to text. It can be text to image. It can be image to video, right? So there's what we call a multimodal set of inputs and outputs now that people are really having a good time playing with.
I've enjoyed using it to put my character designs for my Dungeons and Dragons
Sure. Yep.
group in and getting a picture out.
Yep. Yep. And have you noticed at first it's like, oh, this is amazing, and then it's like, oh wait, so you've made your barbarian, and but you really want your barbarian to have a mustache, and you can't make it do
I
it.
can't get
Yeah.
it made some assumptions that wasn't going in the direction that I wanted it
And
to.
this is a key thing with these generative AI models is that most of the ones that people interact with, they're trained on a giant pile of data, usually off of the internet, and they tend to be what I would describe as general, right? They
Mhm.
can kind of do lots and lots, almost anything approximately well, reasonably well, right? But then when you try to get it to do a specific thing, that's where you can start to see some of the cracks in the veneer of what these things can and can't do.
You're right. I use it for things like headlines, social media posts, but there's obviously a lot going on behind the scenes, that black box of a program.
Yep.
So, what are some of the common assumptions and maybe pitfalls that you've come across that maybe researchers are bringing you that you're like, oh, these are things people need to know not to do, or ways not to say things, or what are some of those assumptions that people bring?
It's highly variable across people in terms of what they're assuming. But a dangerous assumption is that you assume that the output you get is always correct.
Hmm.
Don't assume that. And in the case of your example with where you're just playing a role playing game or something like that, what the consequences of that assumption are not that severe, right?
No one's dying.
It's fine. And so that would be a thing that people need to pay attention to, depending on how they're using these tools, what their specific use case is. I guess people make an assumption about the privacy of the data that they put in as their input, and then again, what they get back as their output. Shouldn't make assumptions about privacy and security. There are ways to mitigate that risk, of course, but you shouldn't make assumptions that this giant list of sensitive data that you're trying to summarize is going to be secure when you send it over the internet to a company that makes its money from training these models on data. So those would be the two that I would start with. Don't assume it's always correct, and don't assume it's private and secure.
I do want to dive into what your team is actually doing.
Okay.
I know they have a new program that's working with U of I researchers on kind of individual projects using AI.
Mhm.
So, can you tell me first about just generally what the program is?
Sure. So this is the brainchild of Michael Overton, who's an associate professor in politics and philosophy and our associate director in IIDS. He called it the Faculty Fellows in Generative Artificial Intelligence. And the idea was, as an institute, we knew We needed to understand how people wanted to use this technology and these approaches and figure out what's our role in helping them do that. Do we need more computers? Do we need more training? Do we need more experts? We had no idea what people were thinking. How were they going to use this? What did they want to do? And the university is a big place. So Michael set up the first iteration of this faculty fellows program. We had 4 in our inaugural class, and we just worked with them over the course of the semester to understand what their interest was in terms of how they wanted to use generative AI. And then we connected them with the right experts in IIDS to help them realize that, get them over that activation energy of how in the heck do I do this? We learned a ton. And some of the projects turned out to be really, really cool. And now Michael's got another cohort of faculty that he just started working with this semester.
Do you have an example from that, one of the projects that kind of stood out?
Many, more than one, but yeah. So I'll start. We work with Miranda Wilson, who's a professor of cello in the School of Music. So we met with her and she talked about her scholarship and the fact that, she's teaching cello and there was these very old books that she wanted to translate. One of them was in Old German and it had specific word terms in it related to the practice of cello and specific references to human anatomy. It's a challenging translation task. Then she wanted to do this so that she could use that material to teach students and then share it, right? The funny thing was, we sat down, we understood a project, we were excited about it. I was seeing emails go back and forth about how the project was going. And I was seeing some progress where she was working with Luke Sheneman and John Brunsfeld in her institute. And they were getting some results in terms of taking these pictures of these pages and translating it into English. And so I went and I sat in on one of the faculty fellows meetings and I was like, this seems really exciting. It looks like you guys have a couple pages. It looks like it's working. What do you think it's going to take to get this whole big, hundreds of pages book finished? And they're like, oh, no, we're done. Yeah, we finished it last night. And it took about maybe $100 in like token charges.
Which, if you're going to hire somebody, which would be challenging because Old German plus cello terms plus anatomy terms
Yep.
would be a very big lift. Most people are not expert in all 3 of those things.
Nope.
Would obviously be much.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Now, and let's just acknowledge that this is a sensitive topic. Because arguably, we did a thing that normally Miranda would have had to spend thousands of dollars on
Get a
human
grant,
translators. Yeah.
Do a thing.
That's a trade-off that we have to acknowledge. I don't want to shy away from that, but still, they did it. It was a very innovative approach. They used what Luke called an ensemble of models, a bunch of different models that were compared to each other to get like a consensus translation. And then I think Miranda plans to present that work at a conference. I think it's in Norway coming up, and then publish it through the library like she did with her previous translations. So
I know I've actually talked to Miranda about this. The ethics and everything is part of what you discuss as this little cohort of AI researchers.
We can't hide from it, right? Like this is a thing. It enables certain things to be done much more quickly, a lot of times more accurately. Humanity has confronted automation in the past many, many times, right? And there's always this trade-off of, wait, people used to do that, and now this machine is doing it, or something like that. And so, we discuss it with all the fellows, and it's not like we all have the right answers here. It's important to sort of understand what we are doing and why we're doing it.
Make conscious, thoughtful decisions.
Yeah.
All right. You have these smaller projects with the individual professors, but you're also doing quite a few larger projects that University of Idaho and possibly other universities could benefit from as well. Which one would you like to talk about first?
Yeah, the one that makes the most sense is related to a grant we just got recently. So we would call the project Artificial Intelligence for Research Administration.
Okay.
But here's the basic idea. Research administration means the people whose jobs are to make the operations of our research enterprise run. So they manage our grants and set the budgets up and help us submit proposals and make sure that we're compliant with all the federal rules related to use of animals or human subjects and all of those kinds of things. And that profession in general is very overworked because the regulatory complexity is skyrocketed, the stakes of being wrong have skyrocketed, and the resources associated with doing that work has stayed flat for decades. And those jobs are really challenging. And at least at our university, a lot of manual, like data transfer type stuff,
A lot of copy
a lot
paste
of
from
copy
one thing
paste,
to the other.
and it can be tedious. And when you have a human doing that, you can make mistakes and things. And so there's a lot of room for artificial intelligence to help those people be much more productive in terms of getting all of that extra work done. And hopefully, we think free them up to sort of use their human brains on the fulfilling stuff that really matters to the strategic mission of the university. So we have an NSF grant to support that work. And so we are building software that integrates into these administrative workflows. And here's the thing, this is not unique to research administration. The financial aid office probably has similar problems. Everybody in the building that we're in is full of people who are experiencing that.
Doing cut and paste from
Yeah,
one place
it's-
to the other
well,
to make
yeah,
sure
it-
that the right information
Yeah.
gets transferred.
Yeah. And so we're building artificial intelligence tools that integrate into those workflows that help them do things faster and more accurately. And then ultimately they can spend their valuable human effort on the more interesting, intellectually stimulating parts of their job. It's a very interesting collaboration because it's literally a research institute full of nerds. It's a term of endearment, right? Nerds, that we're all nerds.
I
And-
already said I play a barbarian
yeah.
in Dungeons and
We're at
Dragons.
a university.
I'm all in.
Everybody here is a nerd, but just different kinds. But we have a research institute, but we're working with a business personnel in our research office. It's very different for us.
Mhm.
So the example that I often describe is, so when someone gets a new grant and an award letter shows up from, say, the National Science Foundation or National Institutes of Health, and there's a whole bunch of information in that award letter that has to get put in various university systems in order to set things up so that that researcher can start spending the grant to do the stuff, hire the people, all that kind of thing. And right now, that can take 2 months. And just that first step, the award letter shows up in an email. An experienced analyst, it takes about 20 minutes for them to sort of look at that. Okay, what is this? I have to pull this out, put it here. I have to take this award number and put it here. There's the budget. So we built a tool that uses some of these large language models. 20 seconds.
Nice.
20 seconds, pulls all the information out, puts it in a data file that we can then put into whatever universities, and we test it. So we prove to the research office, hey, this works 100% of the time. Here's our data to prove to you that it's reliable. We're very careful to say, hey, we're building these things and we won't deploy them until we can prove to you that they work as intended and they're accurate and all of those kinds of assumptions that we talked
Right,
about
that
before.
first assumption, not doing that one.
We don't, here's the thing. It's not enough to just say organizationally, well, just give everybody an account to ChatGPT and it'll help them do their jobs. That's fine. There's gains to be made there when people have access to that kind of a tool. But that does not scale organizationally because one person could come up with one way of doing a thing and another person might do it differently. And maybe you don't get the same answer every time. Our approach is it has to be evaluated for security and for accuracy. It has to be reproducible and transparent, all of those kinds of things. So that's the approach we're taking when we build these integrations. And it's been really fun. We have a bunch of stuff built that we're testing with the research office right now.
So you're doing another project as well that helps you search for an expert that you want, or maybe a teacher you want, or something that you're interested in. Can you tell me about that one?
Yeah, this is an interesting example too, because the first example I talked about, we talked about those assumptions, right? The whole thing is, can you tell if the answer is correct? That's really important. And what are the consequences if it's wrong? So for that thing where we're integrating it into workflows, those things are really important. It has to be correct. We have to know if it's correct because the consequences of getting a budget number wrong or something like that that's not good.
The scientist doesn't get their equipment or pay their PhD or something.
Yeah, like, we can, On the other side, though, imagine you're a prospective graduate student that you want to apply to the University of Idaho to do research in a particular area. And you want to look around to see what kind of major professors might fit that you could reach out to or something like that. Or maybe you're a company and you're like, we need to find a researcher that has expertise in this area or electrical engineering or
in our world, I'm always looking for a journalist asks, hey, do you have a potato expert or whatever? And I'm like,
Exactly.
somewhere.
This issue has hit the news, and we'd like to get in touch with a university expert to
Happens
discuss
all
it.
the time.
Happens all the time. And what do you have to do? You have to prowl around our university website, and obviously you've been here a while, so you kind of know who's around. But to look for faculty web pages, who do we have? And I don't know if you know this, we've discussed it before, but sometimes faculty don't update their websites.
That is shocking
So
information.
it's rare, but yeah. And so this is the thing. Like, we have this portal to the university. It has outdated information on it, unfortunately, and it's hard. It's hard to navigate. And one of the things that these generative AI tools, these large language models, are reasonably good at is summarizing information and stuff. And so what we're working on is a project where we take all of the University of Idaho faculty, their like published scholarly works, so the titles and the abstracts, at least, of their work. If it's the whole paper is open access, great, but that's not super common these days, right? Just yet. And what we've done is we've essentially ingested those into a system and had these models sort of summarize. We can say, okay, given these abstracts that this person has published, write a summary about the main themes of the research, write a summary about the potential broader impacts of the research, write a summary about the methods that this person employs, write a summary about their units of analysis. We've got that set up so that that can be searched. And here's the other weird nerdy thing, okay? Normally when we say search, we're talking about like a keyword search. Artificial intelligence. So you type that in and you're looking for exact matches to artificial intelligence. So that's what we call lexical or keyword search. What these large language models allow us to do is what we call a semantic search. So not what you said, what you meant. So if you put in artificial intelligence, the large language model can interpret that in such a way so that machine learning, other things that are related to the concept of artificial intelligence, will be surfaced in that search. And so you'll be shown, here's some faculty that are similar to the thing that you searched. Here's the publications that are most relevant to what you said. And by the way, here's a general purpose summary of what their sort of research. Now, here's the thing. This hasn't been deployed publicly because we need to test it by putting it in front of faculty and asking them, is it close? What do you think? So far, the response has been the summaries aren't quite as good as if the faculty member sat down and wrote them themselves, but they're better than anybody else at the university would do if they had to write a summary about that other faculty member.
Okay.
I liken it to, if you show up, you call me as you have before, and you say, Barrie, who do we have that is an expert in this area? I got to connect them with a journalist or whatever. And I have an intuitive understanding. I've been here long enough. I know people. I don't need to worry about the keywords you said. I have an intuitive sense of who I would point you towards. And I would give you a general summary of what they're about. And it's probably not perfect, but it's good enough to get you to where you need to go. And that's what this tool does.
It's at least gets you to the next step.
Yeah. And again, the consequences of being kind of a bit off target with a tool like this are less severe. We still care, but they're less severe than like we screwed up that award letter extraction and we put in a bunch of wrong numbers into our financial system of record, right? I mean, you're right. And so the idea is that trade-off, like, can we tell if it's correct? We have to be able to evaluate it. And what are the consequences if it's not quite right? In that case, we can be a little less stringent than when it's millions of dollars in grants or something like that.
And I know you're working on an interesting quirk on that one of generally the more, what one might think of, traditional sciences, the chemistries, the biologies, the geologies. They publish lots of papers.
Yeah, and it's highly indexed.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Lots of words that you can pull from.
Yep.
But we obviously have some very talented professionals working at this university as faculty who are not in those sciences, are artists and architecture professors and people like that. What's your plan there?
Yeah. So this was a thing that really bugged us, right? The STEM world is highly indexed, right? It's searchable already. The journals do all this stuff. Theater, the visual arts, music, there's just all these really amazing, important areas of a university that are not adequately captured with this approach I just described. It's harder to get the theater production abstracts. Like it's just a different world, right? And so we started talking about, okay, well, how do we account for this? It's not fair. It's not okay to represent, here's a searchable database of university faculty where giant
Entire
chunks of it
departments
are just left
gone.
out. It's not acceptable. But here's where we go back to this notion. You talked about the different kinds of inputs to these models, the notion of the multimodal things. We can use visual, like we can use images as inputs. And and so we're actually starting a collaboration. There's a graduate student, Ava Rumler, in the College of Art and Architecture. She's getting her MFA right now. And we're starting a collaboration where we're trying to figure out, is there a way to assimilate or summarize or describe some of the activities that these folks do so that they can be represented in this search tool? So for example, if somebody's done a variety of like creative artwork that has a theme related to climate change, they should be as discoverable as people who are doing research on like climate models and stuff like that. And the idea with Ava, she's a visual artist. She features sculpture a lot. We're taking the pictures of her works, whatever title cards and other materials she uses to describe them in gallery shows and things like that. And we're experimenting with how good these models might be at summarizing the features of those works, and can those be used to generate some sort of a synthesis of what her works focus on and things like that. And we're trying to evaluate what can be reliably done with that versus here's the thing. No matter what, these models will give you an answer. And what we've noticed is they will definitely tell you about the artistic significance of this thing, right? They'll freestyle and hallucinate. And so we want to be cautious about not overstating things. We want to try to represent what, say, media the artist is working in and stuff like that without having it speculate or hallucinate about what the artist might have been imagining. And so far it's working quite well, and we're hoping to start engaging with a couple of additional participants in that area and sort of just start cautiously exploring what's possible.
Well, both of these, really sound like amazing projects for, frankly, any university to have. Are these really, these don't exist out there? Are we really kind of on the leading edge out there in the wilderness?
Yeah, the reality is this NSF grant that I described with the research administration stuff, Sarah Martinick, who is the principal investigator of that grant, she's the director of the Office of Sponsored Program, she's getting contacted all the time by other research administration directors and professionals at other very large institutions. I don't think I should name names and things, but who are like, wait, what are you doing? We want that. How can we get, we are out in front of a lot of other institutions, certainly our peers and aspirational peers. And what's unique is it's very uncommon to have a research institute full of software engineers and data scientists and AI experts and stuff collaborate with the research office. Like normally that's just not something you see very often, if at all. And then the art stuff, I am not aware of other concrete examples like this. The University of Idaho is very much on the bleeding edge in terms of implementing a lot of this stuff within this kind of higher education space, which I think is pretty cool.
Well, excellent. Barrie, thank you so much for coming in today.
If you could turn the heat up outside, that'd be awesome.
I'll work on it.
All right, good.
So, what'd you take away from that one?
I think the thing that stood out to me most is him touching on the ethics of it. Basically, every time I plug something into ChatGPT, I'm thinking about that. I think it maybe, and this isn't something I engage with, but AI art, I think, has maybe more ethical issues. So every time I see something, I'm thinking about that. But it just makes me feel good that someone who's leading the charge in this kind of thing is also thinking about the ethics behind it. It makes me feel good.
Oh, absolutely. Whenever humanity takes on these kind of big leaps, I think, you have to sit down and ask, okay, what does this mean? How is this going to work ethically? How is it going to affect people? And how do we do this well? So I'm very glad that our researchers are taking the time to at least think through all the implications of their work. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Vandal Theory. You can visit our website, uidaho.edu/Vandal Theory, to learn all about our research. and email us at vandaltheory@uidaho.edu with questions. Check us out on all the podcasting platforms and rate and review us and subscribe while you're there. My name is Lee Cooper.
And I'm Danae Lenz.
Thanks for listening.